Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Dear Kartikeya bhai, Sunil bhai, Pathak sahib, and of course friends, I can see lot of known faces and certainly a very important topic. So, and we were talking just before the COP28 that we would have something, need to have something fresh from the oven. So we have Kartikeya bhai and Sunil bhai, who have, and so we're going to get something which of course is as you know, watched, as witnessed closely from the two of them. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This is a very important topic, and we can see that what is happening in the climate and such important initiatives being taken. And we today, our purpose is to understand what are the challenges and opportunities for India. Of course, the very important takeaway from COP, all the number of them, and important is that what is viable. And Sunil bhai, while we were walking, he mentioned that what is viable is the green, what is viable is the renewable part of it. So I think renewable thrust continues to happen, and that as much as renewable can happen, probably that's something which is the option which in the near future we can see. And thus every country, if I mistake not, is asked to double or triple the renewable energy generation in the year to come. Also, I understand, sir, and I would like you to throw some light on this climate finance, right? Finance goals, again, that's one of the takeaways from the COP28. And climate finance goals, very important that somebody has to fund all the investments that are going into the initiatives being taken. And one important fund, one more thing, just the three takeaways that I read in the newspapers was also to fund the loss of assets that because of the climate disasters that are happening. And so that is also one of the initiatives that COP28 discussed. That's I read in the newspapers. Of course, I would like to understand better from the experts that we have. So we have the experts, and fortunately our AMA Exco committee members, so we told them that we need your time and we need to understand from you what is transpiring and what the challenges, opportunities that we could see from COP28 so far as India is concerned. I'll go ahead first. Of course, Pathak sahib is here, and I would introduce the two dignitaries to our expert speakers, and then we'll certainly, without much ado, get on to their presentation, their talk. So, of course, both of them are known. Ahmedabad, everybody knows them as environment people, and the initiatives that they have been taking, they have been supporting, they have been mentoring so many of the climate-related initiatives. So, Kartikeya bhai Sarabhai, founder and director of CEE. And I was just mentioning to the CEE volunteers also that I am seeing that that this is a place to visit. So if you guys have not been to CEE, I would certainly recommend that that it gives you a feel that yes, there's a lot we need to be doing, and the way the whole ecosystem is done over there. Offices across India, it's headquartered in Ahmedabad, closely associated with the activities of Nehru Foundation and Vikram Sarabhai Community Science Center. He is also chairman of Ambalal Sarabhai Enterprises since 1995, a pharma company. Today, the company is no growth path and formation of two joint ventures that the company is going through. He is a trustee of Sabarmati Ashram, also for preservation, Sabarmati Ashram Preservation and Memorial Trust, and PRL. Kartikeya bhai has served on many committees and Ministry of Environment and Forests and Human Resource Development of the Government of India, primarily focusing on the greening of India's formal education and initiatives of biodiversity education. Currently Vice Chairman of Indian National Commission for the International Union Conservation of Nature, and he led the first international conference on the UN Decade of Education for Sustainable Development in Ahmedabad in 2005. A member of UNESCO Reference Group for DSD and International Steering Committee for the End of Decade Conference. He is member of Advisory Committee of National Council of Educational Research and Training, and the chair of the Earth Charter International Council. So we can get an idea about, we can call him probably a green man, right? So that we have. and all the initiatives, all the life, all the perspiration that he would have put into so much of things that probably the generations would take advantage of. May I request Pathak sir to please help me felicitate Kartikeya bhai.
Welcome, sir. Thank you very much.
I'll introduce the other speaker also so that we don't have any interval between for the introduction, Sunil bhai. So no break, we'll have the seamless continuation from one speaker to another. Dr. Sunil Parekh, and happy to mention Dr. Sunil Parekh, he's some advanced doctorate that he has got, and I'm trying to understand, that's even more than a PhD. Senior Strategy Advisor at Zydus and Jubilant Bhartiya Group, and Director in one of the oldest VC firms, that's Gujarat Venture Finance Limited, GVFL Limited, iCreate, and several startup incubators and angel funds. He is a co-founder of TechExchange, that's India-UK Partnership for Startups. He has 48 years of work experience with corporates in India, Africa, US, and he's been a delegate and speaker at UNFCCC conference, COP27 at Egypt in 2022. TEDx speaker, several seminars, empaneled arbitrator and fellow of Indian Council of Arbitration, member of several national industry associations like CII, FICCI, and many more. Dr. Parekh is awarded in Gujarat and nationally by esteemed organization, on the board of several leading NGOs, academic institutions, think tanks, and educational institutions, associated with the World Economic Forum Geneva as a founding curator AGS. He has contributed to the literature on Gujarat industrial development for Oxford University Press publication and ORF Foundation. And additionally, he is also a man who promotes a lot of culture in the city that I am doing. Pathak Sahib, may I request you once again to please felicitate Dr. So over to the experts who would want to, okay, Kartikeya sir, and you want to be doing it from there, or?
I can change it also.
Okay, fine. So then somebody will help put the slides, please.
Put the slide on first, put on the first one. Full screen करना. अच्छा, I can change it here also. I change it here. Thank you very much.
Is this fine? You want me to?
Dr. Sawant? No, it's absolutely fine.
Fine.
It's absolutely fine. Thank you very much. Just before COP, when we were sitting in the Governing Council meeting, we felt it is critical that our members really understand fully what is going on in the climate change. We read a lot about it today. I think the word is known by, a very wide number of people that something is up there. There is confusion whether the ozone hole and the climate change is the same. And if you ask a lot of people, they will confuse the two. Something has to be done is also known. But where are we? Why are these people spending 2 whole weeks, thousands of people, negotiating? What is this negotiation? What is happening? And it was very critical. And I think Sunil Bhai did one last year as well. And I think it is important as we go along that all our members really understand this process, because what needs to be done is very much an issue not only of us as citizens, but also us as industrialists, as business people, as city planners and everything else. So I'm going to start here. Sunil Bhai will take over and tell us what happened at the COP, and then I'm going to say a few words at the end of that. So first, I think we just need to understand that the temperature rise which we are seeing, the Copernicus Climate Agency service, which measures this, has seen that this year has been perhaps the hottest year in this planet's history since we measured it. It goes up and down, as you can see in the chart, but the trend is very clear how it is going up. And if you see from since about 1960, it is just a continuous straight going up. Now, we will argue that so what? You are talking and arguing about 1 degree, 1.5 degrees. That is the difference between morning and evening. It is the difference between summer and winter. So why is it so important? And when we go to talk to children, I ask them in the class that can you go to school when it's very hot or very cold, and they'll say yes, of course we can go. Then I say, let's say your body temperature goes up by 1 degree. Can you go to school? So of course everyone raises their hands saying, I'm sorry, we can't. So there's a difference between a systemic change in temperature and an external change in temperature. And it's important to know that. Even someone like a president of the US was standing in the snow in New York and saying, look at these people talking about global warming when it is snowing. That is not the point. It's not the point that in one stage, and therefore we use nowadays more climate change rather than global warming. And the reason is that it is leading to extreme temperatures. And we are seeing it in Ahmedabad as well. We saw recently perhaps even a hailstorm in Rajkot. So this change which is happening is the average. It's like having a fever, which is why I've said Earth. The chart is showing that we still can do something. We still can do something, and those 4 lines which go up, one is a very optimistic line, which is that the temperature above what it was pre-industrial will not go up beyond 1.5 degrees Celsius. Now this 1.5, we are very close to it. In fact, on some days, the Copernicus group has said that we have actually reached it on certain days. But on an average in a year, it is still not something which we have reached, which I don't know, my colleagues here will say perhaps we are at 1.1 degrees or so globally. Can we stop it at 1.5? Now, when we had earlier agreed, we said no, let us keep that as an absolute Lakshman Rekha that we don't cross that 1.5. We've even talked about 2. The line which goes right up there is taking you to 4. And even our scenarios, computer scenarios of what would the world look like if it went up to 4 is very complex, because climate and this thing has huge effects. I mean, think of the largest water cycle in India, which is based on the fact that the summer our ground gets hot, and the difference and the clouds bring the rains and dump it on India. That is that cycle. Now if you damage that cycle for India, you can just imagine what will happen. So what is this about? And as I said, it's not the ozone issue, it's the issue of carbon. There is this greenhouse effect around the world. Most of you know it, and I'm repeating some of this because you might know it, but it's good to keep a few of these points in mind when we go into the points which Sunil Bhai is going to talk about on what needs to be done. So the balance was that Earth emits carbon dioxide or its equivalent, like methane, for instance, and others, and also absorbs. The oceans absorb it, trees, of course, absorb it. There is an absorption. There is a cycle. It was a global cycle. Now, what has happened because of human intervention is that the amount which we release is much more than what is absorbed. That's basically the balance which has been broken. Here it says, for instance, that about half of what we have said is absorbed. Now, this has been going on for some time. And as a result, there is already a huge accumulated amount of excess carbon which is there. There is some space remaining. And the whole issue of climate justice, which didn't come up so much in this COP, but is something which all of us should be well aware of, that what is our position? What do we take when we say that we are emitting so much, we are not developed? Do we have more space or do we not? So business as usual, by 2030 you will go up to 4.48 billion tons, out of which India emits this thing. India emits that much. So the planet's absorption capacity is not adequate for this. Of course, we are trying to increase it. Total emissions This gives you an idea how Asia, which is in the red, and then China is the biggest out of it, India is the next one, and then some of the other countries. USA, Europe, and then some of the other, South Africa and other countries. So in total terms, India is a big emitter. China is, of course, a far larger emitter, so is USA. So when abroad people talk about India, they say, but you people are emitting so much. We don't like to argue that total emission, because there is a global thinking that each citizen on this planet has an equal right to development, an equal right to have a lifestyle which is good. And therefore you cannot calculate the total emission of a country which is perhaps already today the largest, most populated country in the world. We probably crossed China some months ago. And it's 1/6 of humankind. So the issues there are really the per capita issue. Now here, if you see the blue line at the top, which is USA, was 14, it was 20, it is sort of coming down, no doubt, which is a good thing. But look at where India's line is. This is the bottom blue line. India is going up, and it will go up, because the minute we say that we want to be a developed country, Prime Minister has said that by 2047, we want to be considered a developed country. A developed country means that our energy requirement will go up. But can it go up responsibly? That's the question. Can it go up responsibly? So we have two targets. We have to raise the economic level, and at the same time be responsible global citizens in this. So China is already at 7. You can see China, the way it is rising, it's a bit flattening now. Europe is trying to reduce. The world is about 4.3. But India is rising. So we argue that the fairness is to do with the per capita and not with the total emission. Now, in 1992, these conventions really came up. That is when the decision happened. That was a formal, I was lucky enough to be part of the India delegation way back in 1992. And at that time, these three things came up: the convention on the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and then there was another one on desertification and on biodiversity, which we are not talking about today. The actual was entered into force in 2 years later, in 1994. And the parties, each country is called a party. The parties meet every year, and that is called COP. The meeting of the parties, the convention, conference of parties is COP. So we are now at the 28th COP, which is just concluded. And each year it's held in usually a different one. There are a few milestone ones. The COP3 at Kyoto led to something called Kyoto Protocol, and at that time, the feeling was that some of the globe can decide what each country will do, and there were commitments and everything else. That model was done but didn't work, really. And then after a lot of discussions, people were hoping that at Copenhagen there would be something, all the presidents did nothing. Finally at Paris in 2015, that COP really led to the Paris Agreement, and which is still considered one of the main agreements which is there. The Paris Agreement was based on countries individually saying what voluntarily that this is my targets. So it was not India telling, say, Bangladesh, okay, you should do this, Bangladesh telling America. Individual countries had their targets, had plans, and that is what. I should also remember Paris Agreement for two things. India has been talking about lifestyles all the way from 92. And at 92, the senior President Bush said that if you're discussing lifestyle, I'm not going to come. The American lifestyle is not up for negotiation, right? So the word was quickly dropped. I think we should be proud of the fact that Prime Minister Modi and the Indian delegation finally managed in Paris to get the word lifestyle introduced into the introduction, into the foreword of the Paris Agreement, which was lifestyle. And that whole thinking has gone into what is developed as Project Life by the Prime Minister. And as you know, in the G20 meeting, he heavily talked about that unless global lifestyles change, you cannot just change it by asking industry. And if all of us want to consume everything, but then we are blaming the power company, why are you emitting? But you are consuming. So that was that. And now we come to the COP28. There was a huge amount of people, 70,000 delegates from various sectors. But those countries which argue, you should just know that there are various groups, and these groups overlap, and each one has its own interest. Of course, the 39 small island states have a very different stake in this than anyone else, because to them it's their existence. Their existence will disappear. It's not a question of feeling too hot or having to have too much rain. The country is not there. So they have a very strong thing, and to them anything which does not stop at 1.5 and the finance required and everything else required for it is a failure. But there are many other unions. There's G77, which are the developing countries plus China. There's the African Union. There's, of course, EU. There's, of course, OPEC, which is the petroleum. And there are something like 28 different groupings. So they have their side meetings also. So here there were key negotiations. Broadly, they decide what the negotiations are every year. So one was on the energy package. On adaptation. Now, what is adaptation? Adaptation means that climate change is going to happen. Whether we like it or not, for the next, it will going to go worse before it gets better. So how do we protect ourselves? How does the country adapt itself? The loss and damage funding. What about the countries which have already suffered? And the global stock take of where we are. So I'm going to stop here. And Sunil Bhai is really taking the story now from what COP does and how you go further. Sunil.
Thank you. Let me presentation change karon. Let me first of all begin with a small comment that I think it's a very important day for me, because to sit with the giant of environment and sharing the dais with him, it's a matter of pride and privilege. I also want to thank my good friend Savan. He's forever looking for new things, and a wonderful guy who really looks at the big picture and brings some very, very interesting programs to us. I see Satyanarayan Dangayach here, I see Mohal here, I see Preeti here, I see Tushar here, Parimal here, a lot of good friends, and yes, Prashant Bhai. So all the people who are seriously interested in, Prakshal, you also seriously interested in it. So let me take you quickly without ado. November 30th to December 12th was 2023 in Dubai. The UNFCCC has 197 country signatories to the whole program. Altogether, during the year 2023, 283 events have been held. So we feel COP is just one big element, but there are so many of them that are behind the scenes, and 23 of them other than COP were held during COP in Dubai alone. So it's a gigantic machinery that works throughout the year, and we'll try and give you a glimpse, as Karthikeya Bhai has given you some idea of the magnitude of the issues, the problems, and how so many sectors have to be dealt with. We only look at environment, we look at carbon, but there are so many other aspects there. This was attended by public, private, and social sectors. Government at all various levels attend the meeting. There is business, there are investors, there is civil society, there are academics, there are think tanks, there are experts, there are frontline communities that are affected, there are indigenous peoples who have really lost out in the bargain, there are startups in a very big way this time, and then there are multilateral organizations, World Bank, IMF, and the whole lot. And this year, COP28 introduced faith groups for the first time as a formal agenda item to bring religious leaders also into the picture. Youth were given much more prominence. Innovators were really looked at very, very seriously, and they had an opportunity to present and have dialogues with other things. And there were about over 75,000 delegates in the blue zone. Now there is another zone which is called the green zone, where I am told that over 1 lakh people went. So, today this COP it's a gigantic exercise of networking as best as you can. Yes, got it. So this is the head of state. It always starts with the world leaders. Over 100 leaders all come together. You can see Narendra Bhai, and on two sides you have the two tall sheikhs, and then one short sheikh in the middle, and then lots of people come together. This time both China and Biden, US, did not attend the COP. So whenever this happens, there is this feeling that is not being regarded very seriously. But I think I'll let you be the judge of how successful or how otherwise it is, given the fact that what did we achieve. The fact that it was in Dubai led to the fact that some people call it dubious. The reason is that the boy who is creating the mischief was the monitor. ADNOC, the Abu Dhabi Petroleum Company, was the president of the entire COP28. So people, actually legislators from all over the world, wrote to the COP Secretariat, UNFCCC, saying this is not on. You can't do this. Anyway, he survived it. And what they have done is an important strategy, which I will again share with you how they managed it. And then there was also a paper leaked and reported by the BBC that his speeches were circulated and discussed with the oil companies prior to his actually making the speeches available in public. The largest number of oil companies attended this function, which was 60, which is both good and bad, because otherwise they don't come to this, they do all their work behind. And there were over 2,500 oil lobbyists who were granted passes to attend for this conference. UAE has zero tolerance to dissent, and in the green zone people come to have actually dissent, because that is what they want to create, the issues that are affecting the large number of people. And he has also been known to talk to the former Irish Prime Minister to say that it is not the carbon that is a problem in the world, but it is unabated fossil fuel that is the problem. So don't chase the oil companies, chase the abatement. So if you can capture the carbon once it is generated from going into the atmosphere, then that is more important than telling the oil companies that you should stop producing petroleum products. Now, everybody has made a mockery of this statement because the technology to capture carbon is all in the air itself. The costs are out of control. There is no economic viability. There have been some experiments. And to say that this will solve the problem of all petroleum and all carbon that is going into the air was hogwash. So this was the profile of the man who was actually presented to us at the time of the pump. So my presentation starts with the fact that there are 4 Fs that the UAE sets itself a goal for during COP. We must judge anything by the goals that were set for it by the people who organize it. First was F, is fast track the emissions reduction. GST is a very global stock take, is an experiment that has been done for the first time since 2015 of the Paris conference, which takes stock of which countries have done how much in terms of carbon reduction. And this global stock take says we are heading over 2 degrees, close to 2.5 degrees today, if all the commitments that are made, and they are only pledges, it's a voluntary, if all the pledges are committed, even then we are heading towards over 2.5%. And therefore the 43% reduction from 50 gigatons or 40 gigatons of total emissions to 22 gigatons was totally off track. The second is fixed deploy climate finance. We require $3 trillion a year, which is the size of the Indian GDP. And today, even the 100 billion that was promised, not happened. The third focus area was on adaptation, nature and people, lives and livelihoods. The fourth F that he wanted to focus in the conference was inclusivity. And this time he said, let's take the MSMEs along. There were the 4 themes that he had announced to achieve these 4 goals. Technology and innovation being one major area. Inclusion, frontline communities, keeping them in the center of all these 4 discussions. And finance. So issues, status and challenges. What were the expectations of COP? I will spend one slide. I will spend one time on one slide for what has been agreed in UAE in COP28. What is India's story and what are Gujarat's steps that Gujarat has taken? A little bit of few pictures about what the COP looked like. So for those who have not gone there, I would encourage you to go to the next COP, because I think the green side is much more interesting than the negotiation side. And the last one, which Karthikeya is very good at, he has done so much work on this, is how do each one of us take some responsibility for the carbon and take some steps to cut our own personal carbon footprint, and what are few practical steps that you need to take. As he mentioned, the world is emitting 50 billion tons. There are 2 figures here, 38 and 51. I go with the 51 because it is by the UNFCCC. Of carbon dioxide equivalent per year, 300 billion tons of carbon is already in the atmosphere. So every time we put 50 and you put 7 years gap from 2023 to 2030, in another 7 years, we'll put another 300 billion tons, the graph that he mentioned. And that absorption capacity is not there. And that is the reason 7 years target or 2030 was taken based on this logic that we really need to work hard at it. India emits 2.8 billion tons out of this 50, which is equivalent to 5.6 tons percentage. And if India does no other thing and continues to grow the way it is with fossil fuels, this 2.88 will become 4.48. The world needs to come down to 18 billion tons of carbon per year from 51 billion tons by 2030. This is the only way of ensuring that we do not exceed 1.5 degrees as an average. Today, as Karthikeya Bhai mentioned, we have, and some places, 6-7 days in this year, we have touched 2 degrees in some places. So this is a reality that we really need to take care of. And if you take the average of 18 billion tons and divide it by the population of the world, in 2030, we should have a cap of 2.25 tons of carbon dioxide per person in the world. Now, India is at 2.8 already as against the goal of 2 to 2.25, and we still have a long journey to continue to grow because of economic development. As you mentioned, USA is 10 tons per capita, China is 9 tons per capita, EU has come down to 4 tons per capita, UK is 3 tons per capita, India is about 2 tons, but the world average is 6 and we are 1/3 of the world average as India. Now, where does this emission come from? The world estimates that 31% of the manufacturing contributes to the total amount, 27 is electricity. So these two together is almost 60% of the total emissions. In India, it is manufacturing that is 27% and electricity, which is much larger, is 57%, and therefore these two together account for 80-85% of the total emissions. What was this slide? One slide is on what did we expect from COP? We expected that based on the fact that it was the hottest year on earth, I mean, this is not a small thing to say, and the largest number of climate disasters, big and small, across the world. And therefore, there was a seriousness and a palpable feeling that something should happen. And the global stocktake was very categorical. We are way out of target and we need to correct ourselves. So the expectation was that delivering climate finance, huge cuts in this, remittances and multilaterals has to be reformed, because today the budget of the World Bank is $400 million as against $3 trillion that is required only for mitigation. If you add the adaptation and the loss and damage, the World Bank and IMF are nowhere in the picture. So how the hell are we going to get large amount of public finance to do this? The other big story that we were looking forward to, which gives a source of money for developing countries, to do carbon trading. So if we cut down our carbon in India, or you set up a large garden, or you start greening Ahmedabad, you can then, under the carbon trading rules, get good amount of dollars from abroad, which can then fund a lot of things. On this aspect, the West has dragged its feet, pushed us into all kinds of procedural elements, and the agreement did not emerge, and they pushed it for the next 2 COPs to happen. The big story, according to me, which we have missed, is the removal of subsidies on petroleum. This is close to $400 to $500 billion, which is $500 billion. You make petroleum products more expensive, then it makes common sense that you generate money for the development work, loss and damage, and cut down the consumption of what is causing you the pollution. No decision. Taxing of fossil fuels and subsidies both have been a very big neglect areas, big sources of finance, and taking us on the right path. Building resilience to increasingly severe, so the loss and damage fund and the adaptation fund, and 39 small countries which have issues of survival, and big technology innovations are required to achieve what the technologies that are there are totally 12 technologies that are required to transform Earth and take it on the path of saving the planet. Out of this, methane reduction technologies, carbon capture and storage, battery storage, green hydrogen, nuclear and solar are some major ones where we expected major breakthroughs and incentives to be announced. And so this was the expectation. Now what happened actually? On GST mitigation, every 5 years we have to submit the report. The next GST report will come 5 years from now. So up to 2028, we will take stock. For the first time, the good part is that up to now they have been only wanting to talk coal. Coal is important for the developing countries. We can't give up coal. We depend on coal. The West is saying that go down on coal first because it's a dirtier fuel. India and the developing countries are saying that if you want to go down, then go down, take down all fossil fuels and just not coal alone. But that is against the interests of the West. So this was a sore point in various negotiations that we've seen for many years. But this time, the oil company, the oil magnate, actually managed to get away with a word called transition away from fossil fuels. So it is not phase down, it is not phase out, it is transition away. So India has regarded this as something that meets its requirement of wanting to rise up in coal consumption till 2025 and then drop it by 40% going to 2030. But otherwise, if this phrase was not there, then we were not going to be allowed for any more coal, expansion of coal plants. So China, Saudi Arabia, Russia, India were very happy with this whole arrangement, and so were the oil companies, because phasing away, transition away is something that leaves the room for everybody to chart their own program in terms of how do they want to achieve the final goal by 2030, by going up and down, going straight down sharply, or going gradually down. The second big agreement that took place is that the world will go, and there was a commitment, a declaration, that the nuclear power in the world by 2050, this is not by 2030, by 2050 will go 3 times higher. The world produces roughly 370 gigawatts of nuclear power today, and by 2050 we should have about 1000 gigawatts. The reduction of methane by 100 countries was signed. I think it was 112 actually. Oil companies were included, and this was a big thing. It's a low-hanging fruit. The sources of methane are to agriculture and oil companies. The oil part of the company, there was a declaration on that. Then another 120 countries have said they have agreed to triple their renewable energy by 2030. Now this is a big step, and is a major step in this direction. And the last one was, countries also agreed to double their energy efficiency. Now I want to cite an example to you. The EU roughly has a turnover of 13 trillion GDP, but they consume less amount of carbon than India, which is only 3.5 trillion tons. So the intensity of energy intensity of GDP is 4 times higher in India than it is in EU. And this is what is meant by the energy efficiency. How much energy do you require for the kind of course you could be in manufacturing, agriculture or services. It makes a difference as to how much carbon you will consume. But the intensity, India has committed itself to reduction by 45%. But overall my feeling is that it is disappointing. The whole world was charged. GST showed that we are way out of line. It was the hottest year on earth. And yet, the kind of breakthroughs that we wanted in terms of massive big announcements of reduction and financing of reductions did not take place. So to me, this is my take. People have different views depending on where they come from. Loss and damage fund was announced on the very first day, and it was a big achievement. Sharm el-Sheikh, I remember, it was announced. This time they funded it. 875 billion have been pledged, and UAE has contributed 100 billion. EU has given a very large amount, and surprisingly, out of 875 million, US has given only $10 million. Chicken change for a giant, but such is life. The second is GGA, Global Agreement on Adaptation. Now this global, what happened at Sharm el-Sheikh for loss and damage has taken place on GGA. A framework has been prepared. Now they have to put the masala into it, they have to agree on the sectors, they have to agree on the indices to measure, and then finally decide on the funding. So this is an ongoing exercise for adaptation. Finance and justice and inclusive justice, $85 billion were committed for all the other sectors other than carbon during the discussions on health, on energy, on women, gender issues, and so on and so forth, which is also quite a significant amount. And a $30 billion Altera fund for energy transition was announced by UAE alone as its contribution to the whole exercise, and $5 billion out of this is meant for reserved for the poor, which is going to be leveraged to become 200 billion over the next 2 years. And the last was, the realization came that technology, innovation and startups all put together with the existing technology today, we can handle only about 30 to 40% of the technology needed to reduce the carbon is proven technology which is commercially available, like solar and wind. All the other things like hydrogen and carbon capture and all that are extremely expensive. Some of them are at the nascent stage and they are nowhere near commercialization, and therefore the rest is still under development. These are the 12 technologies, those who are interested. This is a very good slide by McKinsey. Both Karthik and I liked it a lot. It says that you can break these 12 climate technologies which will solve the problem of climate change into 4 groups. One is called clean electrons, which consists of nuclear energy. Second is energy storage, which is batteries, lithium, and other forms of storage. Third is batteries. Fourth is heat pumps, and fifth is renewables. Then the second group, which is below that, is that the first one was clean electrons. The second group is called clean molecules. Hydrogen and sustainable fuels, synthetic fuels and chemicals that can also be used. The third group of technology is carbon removal, CCUS, which is carbon capture and storage, and nature-based climate solutions. And the last group of 2 technologies, which makes it a total of 12, is about circular technologies and alternate to proteins and agriculture. Meat consumption is one of the major reasons why carbon dioxide and methane is emitted, and therefore the alternate to protein is a must. The world has to think of going vegan or vegetarian in order to survive on the reduction of things. Now the important thing is those 4 round figures, these ones. These are the gigatons. If you see 5, 10, 15 and 20, all amount to 50 billion tons of carbon can be removed if these 12 technologies can reach a level of commercialization. So one gets a feeling of hope when one looks at this, that today we are not there, but 2030 is also not tomorrow, it's also 5-7 years from now, that there is solution to this. The India story. This is a document that all of you must read, get a copy, it's on the website. It is India's long-term low carbon development strategy. It covers all the sectors, industries, trading, manufacturing, transport, then housing, urban heating, cooling, and electricity generation. All of them, there is a 7-year agenda in this that you must have a look at in order to know what are the changes that are likely to hit you into your businesses. India has committed 2070 as a net zero date, 20 years after the big boys have done, the people responsible for the pollution. By 2030, India has committed that 50% of our total installed capacity of electricity will be from renewables. So let me give you the figure. Today, India has 400 gigawatts of energy, out of which 100 gigawatts is renewable. By 2030, we expect that we will go from 400 gigawatts to 800 gigawatts. But the composition of 800 gigawatts will be 400 renewables and 400 carbon-based. So today's carbon out of 300 out of 400 will go to 400 out of 800. And the renewable, which is 100, is expected to increase by 300. So our carbon is going to go up till 2025-26, and then there will be a steep decline as we go forward. Reduction in emission intensity by 45%, as I mentioned. India is already at 36%. So this goal is eminently achievable for us. It is not the same standard as EU, but it is somewhere better than what we have been. The fourth is forest sinks. 2 billion tons of carbon worth of forests had been promised in Glasgow, but this commitment was not mentioned at all anywhere. I think people don't repeat the commitments, but India has committed to taking a forest cover increase to absorb the 2 billion tons of carbon that it is pushing into the air. LED lighting is something that's a fabulous story that is quoted everywhere in the world about how our country has actually embraced LED lighting to reduce our energy consumption. We have schemes for PLI, which we are all familiar with. It covers solar panels, PVs, EVs, batteries. And our ethanol blending for petroleum products has now, Gadkari has said that from 10%, which is all our vehicles are using 10% blend, we are now going to 20% blend of using ethanol based on organic sources, mainly maize and sugarcane. The estimation of money required to take India on this path of mitigation is $170 billion a year. It's not too much. We can't do it. And adaptation, this is the first time India has presented a 668-page document to the world saying that this is our adaptation plan. We have spent 13 lakh crores, which is 5.5% of GDP, in the year 2021 on adaptation. And India is now budgeted for 57 lakh crores over the next 7 years with a cushion of another 15 lakh crores in order, if there are any calamities that happen, then they will have the fund. And what is adaptation money used for? That's the last line, and this is important. But people say adaptation કેવી રીતે કરવાનો? આટલું ભયંકર બધું સ્વરૂપ થાય તો એના માટે તૈયારી કેવી રીતે કરવાની છે? So તૈયારી is in the form of coastal building sea walls near the coast, about 1.5 meters to 2 meters high, drought and temperature resistant crops. And for this our millet is a very big savior. It is drought resistant. It's also a very good hardy crop, and therefore this plan that has been taken, excuse me. Sorry. The third is early warning systems. Before a flood comes or a typhoon comes, if you can warn these people at least even by 2 hours, the proportionate number of lives that are saved. So this is where the money is going to go for. Then disaster resistant infrastructure, and 2 areas have been identified for flooding: airports and power stations, and railway lines, where if there is flooding also, this money will be used to make sure that the water keeps going out so that it doesn't lead to problems. There are lots of other alliances, lots of other announcements. You remember India has the World's Indian Solar Alliance in Gurgaon in Delhi, Noida. And Coalition for Disaster Resistant Infrastructure, CDRI, is another organization that we have given support to. Global Biofuels Alliance, Leadership Group for Industry Transition, LIFE, which Karthikeya Bhai mentioned. Then NDCs, which are nationally determined contributions which each country has to make as to how they are going to reach, and the long-term carbon development strategy that I talked about. India's own nuclear program is that we are at 7 and we will triple it by 2022, by 222 gigawatts from 7 3 times, but not by 2050, by 2032. And the new design that they have approved is quite interesting in many ways. India's rise in India did not agree. New green credit, I think. India announced a new program. The Prime Minister of India announced a new program called Green Credit. I have not been able to understand it fully. I don't see much difference between green credit and carbon credit. If someone understands this, please educate me, because I have not been able to find what is the improvement over that this program is suggesting. And India is getting 50,000 electric buses in its streets by 2027 with the help of US. I'm happy to say Shweta, who is here, was in that meeting where this 50,000 bus happened. So thank you for getting us 50,000 buses, Shweta. Gujarat, what has Gujarat done in this area? It's also good to know where we are. The State Action Plan on Climate Change, called SAPCC, is based on the nationally determined contributions of India. So it has taken its share of responsibility and announced this program. It has taken its share of SDGs, and they have a scheme called Panchamrit. 9 theme areas have been selected under the action plan. They are agriculture, water, health, forest, biodiversity, sea level rise, coastal infrastructure, energy efficiency and renewables, urban development, vulnerable communities, and green jobs. Good thing is they have also started budgeting for it. So 9,000 crores have been budgeted, 19 departments are there, and I think CE will surely be, as a watchdog on this agency, will keep a track as to how this money is being spent wisely and quickly or otherwise. The Gujarat University has a Center of Excellence on Climate Change, and there have partners of UNICEF, GIZ from Germany, and ICLEI. The Government of India sanctioned the National Adaptation Fund, NAFCC, for Gujarat to GIR Foundation, covering the areas of water security, livelihood, and ecosystem restoration. Then there are several blah blah blahs. And then India has been ranked first in India in Climate Index by Niti Aayog in 2022. So this is just to give you a few photographs. This is the conference, COP28. This is the 2-week schedule. On every day there is a topic where everybody, while lots of meetings are going on, that day is declared as the meeting and lots of actions are taken. And you will see here things like health, relief, recovery, peace, finance and transition, trade, energy and industry. 7th day was a day of rest. Then youth, children, education, so on and so forth. And each of this have announced their own programs and own financial commitments, which has nothing to do with the main COP28. The $85 billion that I talked about has come from all these headings and all these initiatives from different parts of the world in under each of these headings. The structure, governing and subsidy bodies besides COP28. Are you going to do it or should I do it? You're going to do it or should I do it? I do this. Please let me know when you want to come. COP28 is only one that became very famous, but simultaneously to COP28, there are two other bodies that the this UNFCCC Secretariat has created. One is CMP 15 and the other is CMA 5. One is for the Paris Agreement, the other is for the Kyoto. The two that Karthikeya mentioned were very, very formative agreements. Then there are two permanent subsidiary bodies called SBSTA and the SBI, which assist the governing bodies. And the Bureau of the COP, the CMP and the CMA, supports all the activities of all these groups. And as I told you, they had 230 meetings this year. And this is what happens there. The country groupings he has already talked about. This is the blue zone and the green zone. Green is for the green guys, not official guys. The official guys are the blue guys. They sit and negotiate. But friends, let me tell you, if you go to COP next year, don't go to the government side. Go to the private side, the green side. It is free for all. It's extremely interesting. This time from Gujarat, I know of about 17 youngsters under the age of 30-35 had gone, and they've really come back enjoying themselves, having built a lot of networks, lot of fellow beings who are interested in the same subjects and globally connected in this respect. This is what it looked like in the blue zone and the green zone. This is the sustainability pavilion at Dubai Expo. Very beautiful. This is the entrance where you enter the whole place and then get lost. And this is the wonderful dome. And UAE is also a master builder. They do lots of good things. I think this was the same dome that they had used when they had launched that big expo last year, So now I will stop here and invite Karthikeya. I've done it at the right time, no? Yeah.
Thank you. I think we've got a sort of glimpse, if you like, of the very complicated nature of these discussions and how many different pulls and pushes there are, because it makes a difference to the countries, and it's in all these different aspects. But I think, as Sunil Bhai mentioned, that while there is in some sense, a good amount of progress, it is not sufficient for what the target is. And I think that message, everyone came to COP has it, and we don't see where this leadership is going to come from, which will do this. The German Watch, which is a German NGO, along with CAN and the New Climate Institute, does what is called a climate change performance index. Now, you've heard already that governments do their assessment, but this is an independent assessment. And my colleague Rixa, just get up Rixa so people can see you. So Rixa is part of this group, and they do this assessment. What do they do it based on? That the greenhouse gas emissions, 40%, renewable energy, 20%, energy use, and climate policy. And based on that, they've looked at every country and have assessed it. And on the 8th of December, which Sunil Bhai showed us the different days. 8th of December was also the education day. And so a lot of the educational activities and what you need to do for the future are discussed there. What was really wonderful to see is that India is one of the only large country among the top 10 which have met the performance. So I think it's incredible that should happen. It was actually ranked 8th last year. It's gone up to 7. But 7th is a bit misleading because Rixa will tell us, but I think 1, 2 and 3 is not there. So it is 7th because nobody has got the 1, 2 and 3 prizes. So you start with 4, 5, yeah, starts with 4. And you can just see this map where you see India is one of the only large green countries. Of course, there is Denmark and Philippines, which are a little better than us and Estonia. So I think we must realize that this is possible. I think the reason to say is that when a country's leadership says that we have two goals, we have on the one hand a goal 2047, 100 years of India, we want to be a developed country. We want to rapidly develop, and therefore we cannot agree on immediately cutting carbon. As he says, from 300 to 400 we will go in carbon, but not 300 to 800. The 400 will be that 3 times faster we will go on renewables from 100 to 400 compared to this. So the whole emphasis, but we are being realistic also. We don't want to go and promise something which we can't do. And here one of the problems the globe faces is that people make commitments which they don't follow. And there is no power on earth today, because the superpowers don't agree, that can enforce anything. You see, as long as small countries break rules, you can always catch them. But when Russia, America and these people don't do it, who is there to say? So this was a wonderful thing, and it was presented by them. And they also every year, every day, I suppose, say which is the country which is not doing well, because there is a watchdog outside of government. And they sit in the blue zone itself, the government zone, and do this. Now, Sunil already said about India, but I think it is worth re-emphasizing. 2070 is our net zero goal. The globally wanted 2050, but we have set for a developing country, 2070 is actually not that, it's not that far away. 2030 is this 50% electricity, which he also again mentioned, the 800, 400 and 400. Reduction in emission intensity, and it's a repeat of what some of the things he said on that, but it's worth remembering what that is. That is, for every GDP increase which you do, how much more carbon, how much more electricity do you need to do it? It shows that are you going on a different path, and of course the forest sinks, and this links to Ahmedabad itself, which, as you know, wants to be 15% green compared to the 10% we have. And at CE, we've got a campaign to help private properties, schools, colleges, industry to go green. And the 5 points which the Prime Minister has said, the Panchamrit, as it's called, non-fossil fuel energy, reducing it, renewable energy, carbon emissions to reduce economy, and the net zero. So Sunil Bhai said that as we end today, we have heard what COP does. But it's not only, we should look at what we do. He's mentioned about eat a plant-based diet. In fact, people who are not vegetarians, they say that, okay, if you're eating 7 days a week, eat non-veg 2 days a week, 1 day a week. Reduce it. Reduce energy consumption. Reduce water usage. We can measure each one of these. Reduce transport, reduce waste, reduce renewable energy. And that big foot there is what is called the footprint. It's a measure of how much you tread on the planet. What citizens can do, and what associations and universities can do. And we are working with several universities just now to see that they can do a lot actually. You can do a lot in neighborhoods, and you can do a lot inside your campus. Reducing your own carbon footprint. Star rating, for instance, has been a great success. You go to a white goods manufacturer and say, whenever I go ask, that does the consumer ask for the rating? And the answer is yes, because there you've been able to align a national interest with a local interest, because people realize that the electricity consumption is less. In cars, today the way electric cars are coming into Ahmedabad, you see continuously now, you see them. I've got one recently, a small one, but it is so good that it makes you show that. But then my grandson asked me that where is that electricity coming from? And so I said, yes, Kavan, it's coming from a coal-based plant. So we must understand that electric cars and electric vehicles is the first step. Once you have that system, and on the other hand, you are changing the electricity production, then it makes sense. But it's a chicken and egg problem. So I think both things have to happen at the consumption end and at the production end. What employees can do. Many companies are today coming and saying, our company wants to spend 2 days over all our employees. Please tell us what we can do. They want to spend every weekend. What can they do? We have plans and we can share these with you. Let's see if this works. Huh? Oh, huh? Yeah, पाछळ जा. हाँ, बस अजून पाछळ. नहीं, पाछळ. अरे तो शेक पाछळ जा. Yeah. Okay, अरे पाछळ. Next, अरे बस. So, you know, मोटू करो कुछ. नहीं, चेल्लू. So, you know, this footprint is someone, basically, there was a Swiss scientist and agriculture, so they think of land. Okay, can we convert everything to land? So you can calculate that, okay, how much wheat do I eat in a year? How many chapatis or whatever, and how much land would be required. It's an easy calculation. You can add waste on it. But you can convert it everything. What is your consumption? And that is the global footprint. Now this has been going on for some time. There's a California-based Global Footprint Institute which you can calculate your own. If I travel by plane, what do I consume? We were working in Hyderabad in 2005 in schools, and in a St. Mary's school, this is the hand of a little 10-year-old girl called Shrija. They put their hand, and our staff asked, what is this? They said, this is the handprint. Now what does this handprint mean? The handprint, they said, means what we can do. So just like we tread on the world, we also have strength. આપણી પણ શક્તિ છે. So handprint represents what we can do positively. And it was such a powerful, small idea. 2007 at a UNESCO global seminar, we introduced it. Today there are countries all over the world which are using the handprint as a symbol of positive action. In Germany, there is even a German website which is talking about the handprint. People have taken ownership of it. And I think that there are not many concepts which started in India, that too in a small school, which have gone global in environment. In fact, the Time magazine, when they wrote 10 best concepts, they put the handprint. And we were very excited till we read that it came from Harvard. So our people were very upset. They wrote to Harvard, to that professor, and he said, I never said I got it from you, but they asked me, so I said Harvard. But because people don't have it in their mind, कि India थी पर वो कई concept आवी शके. But it's such a powerful concept, it's going globally. I'm hoping that 2 years down the line, the dictionary will have it. But this is what it is. And the handprint action is, as he was also saying, individual level, family level, neighborhood, larger community, village, state, nation, regional and global. We can take handprint action all over. So we go to schools and go to communities and do it. I should say that 2 reports I want to just mention, that UNESCO asked us to look at the status of climate change education in India. And this report came out about a month ago, which talks about what is the status of climate change education. As you all know, the National Curriculum Framework, the National Education Policy 2020 and the NCF has come out, and the textbooks are to be written. Now they have this time, for the first time, introduced a compulsory subject called environment at the 10th standard. It is for the first time. It will be a subject which will be done every alternate day for 45 minutes in all schools in India. That textbook, to write that textbook, they formed a curriculum advisory group, which they have just formed. I happen to chair it. It is a great honor. In 2 months we have to do it, but we are hoping that at least we are preparing the next generation. So while we are doing all of these things, at least there will be nobody in the next generation who will not know this. So I end because we need about 10 minutes for question answer. We end by saying increase your handprint and decrease your footprint. Decrease what you are doing, but increase what you can do positively. Thank you very much.
We can have some question answers if there are any questions. Yes, please, sir.
I want to know something about the carbon tax. It is now a talking point in England. Already Bank of India has given. By 2027 they put. So I want to know about the carbon tax. Instead of giving you something, they want to punish you. And EU already has told this, and now Britain has also told this.
I'll start with the CBAM, which is the carbon border tax that Europe is wanting to impose on goods exported from India into the UA. I have tried to calculate what will be the impact on Indian industry. And our back of the envelope calculation, Savan, is that this CBAM is going to give us an average tax of about 4.5% on the total amount of exports from India into the EU. It's a very complicated formula of how you arrive at. It is a work in progress. It is difficult to assess because the kind of data that is required to actually calculate the extent to which your product has carbon in it, especially when it includes not only the carbon you consume in your factory, but also from your suppliers and through the entire logistics and supply chain. So it is going to be a very difficult exercise according to me, but the overall impact is going to be this. In terms of the philosophy of taxation, I totally agree with it. In terms of the geopolitics of it, I don't agree.
And this incentive versus a penalty, this is a continuous debate on which one works, and perhaps obviously you need to do both. But one of the things I think Sunil Bhai mentioned in his talk, that we were giving subsidies, the oil subsidy he spoke about. It's a huge amount. So I think on the one hand, governments have to stop subsidizing things. When we go out and talk about fertilizers and other things for organic, people say, but chemical में तो ये subsidy मिल रही है, तो आप कैसे बोल रहे हैं कि भी ये ठीक है? So I think climate change and environment therefore is not a separate subject. It goes into all our policies, and all our policies need to be seen with that lens. And maybe with AMA we can take sector-wise. This is what we were talking. That maybe sector-wise discussion, very specific.
Yeah. Yes, please.
This is for Karthikeya, sir. Sir, you had mentioned something about your electric car, right? That you had purchased one recently. So nowadays, many people are purchasing electric vehicles, but at source, people say that it pollutes more than the average petrol or diesel car, just because Ahmedabad gets its power from Torrent, the Torrent power plant, which is coal-fired. And the same is true for trains. Some people nowadays, electrification is going on full progress. That is, most of the routes have been electrified. You hardly see any diesel trains running. And steam had been phased out long back. It's been many years, many decades actually. So, but actually these electric trains or electric cars end up polluting more than the diesel ones indirectly. So what is your take on that, and how can we convince people to purchase electric vehicles more, as they are a bit more
Brief, yeah, we
Yeah,
got a
got
question.
it.
We'll
Please.
take a few questions and then we'll answer them.
Yeah.
So let's
The lady next to you.
Let's take 3-4 questions and we'll
Hello. Yeah. It was nice to hear both of you more detail on part, but I just wanted to know for COP28, was there any discussion on waste to energy? Because that's a major thing we need to work on, it waste to energy, and this energy can't be restricted to only the biogas or electricity or to syngas. Now some technologies have come up where we are working on it is on hydrogen. So was there any discussion on that thing, or some good technology coming out where we can convert the waste into energy? So we'll be very keen to work on that
let's
thing.
take 3
Thank
questions.
you.
Yeah. Gentleman here, please. Give
Can
the
I pass?
microphone.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, good evening, sir. What is your personal belief on this EV10 to EV20 ethanol blending? Ethanol blending from 10% to 20%. Won't it create more pollution? Because evaporative emissions of the ethanol in the tank will lead to more ground level ozone and smog.
Any other? One more question, maybe.
Yeah, there is a huge climate finance requirement. So almost $3 trillion, as you said. So, and I don't see much discussion on that. People are clueless, how that $3 trillion are going to come. So how do you see what would be the basics in place which will make sure that we will reach that stage?
Okay, I think.
I in fact already answered that question on EVs
Elec-
by saying that while EV currently certainly saves on pollution, which is also another problem we have. and the air we breathe here. So it clears that. But as long as the power comes from a central coal-fired power station, it is obviously not efficient way of doing it. The point is that we have to read these two things together. That is, the India is changing its power production, and you want EVs. So if you didn't have EVs, then you cannot have that. Even if you change the other one, you cannot do it. So it has to be read together, and this is something which I've already answered. Sunil will answer some of the other ones, but in terms of some of these things, we didn't have time today to discuss the circular economy as such. Now, when you discuss circular economy, you come to the fact that what is the best way of using something. Now, you was talking about waste. Textile waste today, for instance, is burnt to some extent. Oil waste, mechanical oil, is also somehow it is burnt. Now, is that the best use of that, or should you reconvert it into machine oil or not? Should you use textiles in some other way? My colleague Tushar Bhai is sitting here. He's been talking to Surat Industries on what is the way to do it. If you can't do anything, you can do it. There are people who have developed our technology, for instance, plastic waste, that we mix it with bitumen and put it on roads. So the point is that there is not one magic bullet. We don't know for sure that this is the best solution. You can say that this is the best solution in these circumstances. So what might be the best in here might not be the best somewhere else. And the research is on. Therefore, there is a lot of amount which will have to go into research. You have a country where recycling is entirely possible. And so you have to look at that. First of all, we have to prevent waste going there. I have often said that when we started at CEE, we were on the tallest hill in Ahmedabad. Today we are not the tallest hill, because the tallest is at Pirana. So, no, it is Ahmedabad no uncha muchu. You have taken it dekha. Itle we would like again to be the tallest hill. And I hope that we are doing that. This morning's paper is talking about bacteria which seems to be eating
the plastics.
Eating plastic in Pirana. So we don't know. There are lots of solutions, but the optimal solution, and that is why we stress critical thinking. There is not one magic bullet solution which works everywhere. In some cases, yes, finally using it for energy is a good idea. Heat saving. When we went to Kashmir after the earthquake, our School of Architecture students went there, and they were looking at traditional houses there. So below the living room, there's a big room where the goats and sheep are kept. So our Ahmedabad people didn't know. So they said, why is this? They said, so that the heat of the goats and sheep doesn't go waste, and it actually keeps our living room warm. Now that is traditional wisdom for you, but just think how this is. So it's it's not a single line solution. Sorry.
So, Binita, to answer your question about the wealth from waste, we call it WOW, wealth out of waste, WOW. So the WOW projects were mostly in the green zones, where there are lots of people who come out with technologies. They don't form any, there is no negotiation on this. There is no declaration by countries on it. It's a national subject, not an international one. On the other element of ethanol blending, it is well known that the carbon footprint of ethanol is less than that of gasoline. So that our question is answered. And the last question is about $3 trillion. So there are 4 or 5 papers that were presented that actually try to draw the attention of the world to 4 or 5 areas where such large amounts of money are easily available for doing these kind of projects. And the discussion has now shifted, which I thought was a major shift in all the COP27s that we have seen, and COP28, this is my view, that instead of talking about the North and the South dialogue, the rich not paying the poor, the rich being responsible and not keeping their responsibility towards the poor, I think the whole dialogue this time I found was there was a much deeper understanding in the West about the genuine problems of the South. And the second thing was that market-based solutions for financing are actually emerging to come into the area of economic viable projects. So give you an example, about 15 years ago, Gujarat government gave 18 rupees of subsidy for every solar power unit that we produced. Today solar is cheaper than fossil fuels. So this is what we call a mature technology where markets will work for greening India or greening the world. So that is a major source of revenue that will come, where people will take this whole opportunity. Our topic is opportunities for India. The major opportunity for young people like you is to look at projects that make money and green the place, and therefore actually take it whole further. And therefore that market-based incentive is one area. The other big source of fund is this, the thing that I told you. We have a subsidy on petroleum products of close to $500 billion a year, $500 billion. This should be shot in a phase down program, and petrol becomes 2 times to 3 times. Automatically people will start the green charger, the demand will come, and all the young people will start setting up solar projects. I mean, it gives such a big, single regulation will give a post. It's a huge set of money. The other source of money is these pension funds. These pension funds like CalPERS and some of these one in the US, each one is running into, hundreds of billions of dollars. They are looking for the proper conditions to come to developing countries to structure their products in such a way that it makes economic sense for them. Here governments can work out certain amount of annuity, which means if there is a deficit in the profitability expectation for the risk that they are taking in India, and if that risk premium is paid by the government, then the project becomes viable and there is a sense of sovereign grant behind it. So that model was also discussed at length, and these are all, each one of them can give you $2 to $3 trillion each. But believe me, the solution will come from the market, will not come from the governments. They take so much time to decide and discuss and decide that the best of us actually, just fall down from the table,
It's a small comment that we must also realize, we mentioned about the LED transformation. Now, the market forces work because the LED prices also came down and everything else. But the Minister for Energy that time, he said that we are going to use India's clout, the fact that we are such a large nation with such a big demand, to force countries to say that you supply LEDs at this price. So the market forces had to be assisted by the correct government policies. And I think that we must understand. So while government cannot necessarily take its decision or driving it on money, but it's the policies which they create, which will create the market forces, which in turn will create the change. And I think that connection is very important to say that. Okay.
Thank you. Absolutely. I know there would be, do you have questions or you feedback? Is this? Feedback, so that's fine. So important announcement, there's a feedback over here, the QR code, and request you to give the feedback for the this particular session. Thank you. We can take the question offline, or maybe we can take one last question, sir. The one last question, please.
हेलो सर, क्या कोई ऐसा विकल्प है जिससे ये ऑल ओवर जो सिस्टम है वो उस तरह का हो जाए कि जिससे बाय प्रोडक्ट में अभी जो एनवायरमेंटल इश्यूज खड़े हुए हैं वो उसमें बहुत मिनिमम हो, क्योंकि ये सारा इंटरकनेक्टेड है. मार्केट, इकोनॉमिकल मॉडल, पॉलिटिकल मॉडल, एजुकेशन, सारा सोशल मॉडल भी वैसा है. ज़्यादातर मार्केट में जो प्रोडक्ट्स है 10 से 20% तो ऐसी प्रोडक्ट है जो लोग भी बोलते हैं कि अनयूज्ड है, फिर भी पैदा हो रही है. उसके पीछे इलेक्ट्रिसिटी, ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन, सारा कुछ वेस्ट होता है. तो क्या इसको हम परमानेंटली रोक सके? ऐसी कोई थीम है या कोई ऐसा रिसर्च स्टेशन है जहाँ पे सिस्टम चेंज के लिए काम हो रहा हो, ऑल ओवर सिस्टम चेंज?
ये जो बदलाव की बात है उसमें देयर आर मेनी फोर्सेस विच आर एक्टिंग. एक तो एजुकेशन करो, एक लॉज बनाओ, प्लास्टिक बैग नहीं देनी है, वो लॉ आ गया, सिंगल यूज़ प्लास्टिक बैग नहीं देनी है. तो हमने दुकान में जाके बात किया, कहाँ है, क्या किया आपने? तो बोले हमने नीचे रख दिया है क्योंकि ये 15 दिन ये इंस्पेक्शन चलेगा, बाद में नहीं चलेगा. तो हमने अंदर नीचे रखा है. आप सोचिए कि हर रोज़ हम ट्रैफिक एक्सीडेंट की बात कर रहे हैं. हेलमेट का रूल कब से आया? हेलमेट कोई और के लिए नहीं है, आपके लिए है. तो भी आप अहमदाबाद में रोड में देखेंगे तो हेलमेट नहीं पहनते. तो इसलिए कंप्लायंस कैसे करना है, इसमें ये सब की शामिलता है. वी नीड द पॉजिटिव एनर्जी, पॉजिटिव इंसेंटिव्स, वी नीड पीपल कैचिंग समथिंग. हम अभी एक गोवा में बीच में गए थे, तो सब लोग कचरा सब डालते थे. तो वो सिर्फ एजुकेशन से होगा कि एजुकेशन प्लस थोड़ा डंडा भी चाहिए? So that is why it is a combination of these things. तो ये जो आप बता रहे हैं, तो हर प्रॉब्लम के लिए सोचो, कोई भी एक प्रॉब्लम आप लीजिए कि भी मेरे एरिया में मेरे को ये प्लास्टिक बैग नहीं चाहिए, कि कोई लिटरिंग नहीं चाहिए, कोई भी एक प्रॉब्लम देखो तो यू विल कम टू इट. सो वी आर गेटिंग स्कूल चिल्ड्रन ये प्रोजेक्ट में ले कि लेट देम अंडरस्टैंड कि व्हाट आर द इश्यूज ऑन विच कंप्लायंस इज नॉट हैपनिंग. देयर आर मेनी गुड लॉज इन इंडिया अभी. वी आर नॉट बट कंप्लायंस and compliance with readiness.
Yeah, I think very important answer. It will be enforced initially and then it will convert into habits maybe. That's how it may work. That फिर सब जगह कैमरा लगाने पड़ेंगे रेड लाइट सिग्नल्स पे, तो people get enforced and you will not cross the line. So thank you. I think very informative, sir. And certainly I think all of us had some idea, but today we have much more clarity on what transpires in COP28 and that the challenges that we are facing. Sunil bhai in one of his slides mentioned rightly that better than feared, less than needed. So certainly, so there is a ray of hope, and India, I think, as you said, one of that green India was something that we feel that that's a heartening situation that India is playing its role. So there's a commitment, of course, India in balancing it with the developed nation goal by 2047 is I think that the huge way of, I think, machinery, administration, or certainly the fossil fuel tax may be one idea. But I think one aspect, sir, and you can comment that 1,000 companies, the top 1,000 companies are supposed to report BRSR, the responsibility, sustainability report. So in that case, because they have to report that BRSR, they go to their vendors and ask them what is your carbon footprint. So the ecosystem is keeping outside the government machinery also, that if my vendor is in the supply chain creating so much of carbon footprint, that he is not the vendor even if he is supplying me cheaper. So I think that such initiatives are also helping us, and of course the important part is footprint and handprint. We are creating a lot of footprint. How it ultimately boils down to an individual habit of ensuring that we do not increase the carbon footprint and probably work towards that positive handprint. So thank you. Of course, at AMA we have changed all the lights to LED. So we are trying to do that. And of course, one good suggestion sector-wise, if we can take this at AMA and then implement the programs where we can educate the sectors, industries also. Probably there is one initiative that we can take at AMA also. So thank you for such a fabulous response, and thanks to Unmesh bhai for putting more chairs, because we run out of chairs I can see in the room. And certainly thanks a lot, sir. This was so very helpful, and this was so very needed also for communication. This was also YouTube live. I'm sure that we saved some seats with a lot of people on the YouTube. Otherwise we would have to open up some more classrooms. But thanks, ladies and gentlemen, and we'll keep doing this environment initiative programs, and we look forward to your participation, contribution, howsoever that can happen. Thank you. Thank you.